Good afternoon. This is Greg Giardino with Alison Hall with It's Your Smarter Money. We're going to talk to you today about the 2024 required minimum distribution waiver. So it affects those that are IRA beneficiaries, and supposedly it was waived for this year in 2024. So let's talk about who this affects and what the implications are. So if we look at this chart here, there's two sides, two columns. There's IRA owner, which, by the way, it doesn't have to apply just to someone who has an IRA. It can be a 401a, a 401k, or a 403b. And we're also going to talk about non-eligible beneficiaries. So what are those? Well, we can tell you by saying what it's not. So it's not going to be your surviving spouse. It's not going to be a minor child. It's not going to be a chronically ill or disabled person. And it's not going to be a beneficiary that's younger than 10 years from the IRA owner. So keep in mind, this really affects those IRA beneficiaries, those 403b beneficiaries who are inheriting after 2019. So we first have to look at the IRA owner and when they passed. Were they taking their RMDs when they passed, or did they not? So if they didn't get a chance to get to their own required minimum distribution age, well, the beneficiary has to take it out over the 10 years. And they are not required to take an annual required minimum distribution. However, if the IRA owner, the decedent, passed away after starting to take their own required minimum distributions, well, then the beneficiary has to take it out over 10 years, but they have to take an annual RMD, or required minimum distribution, from years 1 through 9, and then finally empty their account in year 10. So this has major implications because the IRS did not extend the 10-year payout limit. So if potentially you keep deferring your required minimum distribution, your accounts may grow a lot larger, and you do not want to get stuck with a tax bomb. So despite the waiver, the big question is, if you're an IRA beneficiary or 403b beneficiary, should you take an RMD anyway this year?
So whether or not to take a distribution this year is determined on a case-by-case basis. Typically, people inheriting IRAs as non-eligible beneficiaries are in their highest earning years. What this means is that those distributions that are taxed at ordinary income rates as high as 37% federally right now are forced to be incurred at the worst time. You might say, well, RMD requirements waived this year, I'll just keep kicking the can down the road. But depending on your situation, it might actually make sense to take a distribution anyway. If the IRS doesn't force RMDs and you continue to wait, your inherited IRA could grow exponentially, leaving you with a huge tax liability, as Greg mentioned, the tax bomb at that 10-year mark. As most financial decisions, being familiar with your options and making a plan is going to help you out tremendously. Do you have high medical expenses or other deductions this year that are going to bring your marginal bracket down? If so, take advantage of that. Are you or your spouse planning to retire next year? If so, maybe it makes sense to hold off until you have a lower income year. Did you already take a distribution because you didn't think the IRS was going to waive the requirement and now you have an unnecessary tax liability? Something like maxing out your retirement contributions can help to offset that additional income. You also have to keep in mind that it's not just your situation. There's external factors at play here too. The TCJA, the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, sunsets at the end of next year. In 2026, brackets are going back up to the levels they were at in 2017. So if you don't have a low-income year on the horizon, it could be beneficial to get some of those inherited IRA funds over the tax fence, while the tax rates are more favorable by a few percentage points, regardless of your level of income. Consulting with a trusted tax professional and/or financial advisor is always recommended for these situations.
And that's a great point, Allison. There's a lot of different nuances to this. And I think the take-home point here is you got to be planning and you have to run some of the numbers. So once again, thanks again for joining us today. We hope you found it valuable. And until next time, see you soon. Take care.